people become enlightened about the whole situation and find it enjoyable. I do really push the idea that there's joy to this lifestyle, and why not try to be an entrepreneur? Why not
Mhm.
try to see what you can do by yourself?
Hey everyone, thanks for coming back for yet another week. Today we're talking to Steve Kodad. What he is a Feng Shui consultant. And to me, that sounded really interesting because I'd heard that term before, but never really understood what it was or how someone could consult for it. So this conversation was really exciting for me because we dive into a little bit of what that means in real estate and in construction, how to make your home more feng shui. We'll go into his backstory of everything from coaching to his work in the real estate business. So I know there's going to be a lot of things that you can get out of this. So remember to like, subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. But let's dive into the conversation with Steve.
Hi, this is Steve Kodad. I started with Feng Shui uh, over 18 years ago. At that point, I was actually a realtor and the owner of a 34 agent real estate company in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was always looking for ways to actually sell my homes as fast as possible, get to a closing, go to the next one. And I had something sent to me through email about something that I couldn't even pronounce at that point called Feng Shui. I found out. And it intrigued me. And so I sent away for the materials, just some tapes, and listened to them for quite a long time over a couple day period. And I ended up getting a listing at this point in my neighborhood that was only a few blocks away. And it decided, well, okay, they've had problems. They're not present. They had already left for, believe it or not, Winston-Salem. And at this point, I figured, well, why not? Let's see what I can do. According to this tape, I can actually make a big difference by changing a few things. So I brought some items from my house, much to my wife's pleasure, and we set it up. I held an open house that weekend and got an offer right away. They had been on the market with other real estate agents for months and months and were frustrated, which a lot of people do get very frustrated in this business. So, it just seemed to really have, well, maybe it has something to it. And then I started using it for my other listings, and they became very enamored with it and very enthusiastic, and they enjoyed it. They enjoyed working with it and making sure that certain things were taken care of before there was a showing. And so it really piqued my interest that maybe I've really got something here that really might really work, and also is very unique and can set me apart. So I decided again about 18 years ago to get certified, and I got certified in Knoxville, Tennessee, with a well-known feng shui couple by the name of Helen and James Jay. And one thing led to another, and then after 2 or 3 years of having success with real estate and feng shui, I just decided I wanted to pursue a different pathway at that point. So I went to my partner and said, "Hey, look, David, I'm going to be selling to you at this point, and I'm going to pursue a passion of feng shui at this point." And even though a lot of people said I was really crazy, uh, it worked out, and I've never looked back. So I left real estate at that point. During that period of time, uh, we moved from the Charlotte, North Carolina to Florida into the Sarasota area. And that area, if anything, has probably even got more interest in it. So, one thing led to another. And my company at that point was called the Feng Shui Cure. It's still in existence. I do evaluations and all that kind of stuff. But I always knew that I really wanted to have my own school. So I met my partner, Lisa Albin, at this point about 6 years ago because she was having difficulty selling her home, and she found me on Google and said, "Well, let me bring him in because we've been on the market now for 6 months and we're not getting anywhere." So I met her at that point. She took all my stuff to heart, did all these things over the weekend, and then a couple of days later sold her house, and we've been friends since then. And she, at that point, was working as an executive producer for the Home Shopping Network. Frankly, I never thought I'd ever hear from her again, but she contacted me uh, 4 years ago, wanted to talk to me about what I did, and so we met halfway between where I am and where she is in St. Petersburg. And one thing led to another, and we decided to start a school that actually certified new consultants. So we've been at it now for 4 years. We're a gold standard school ranked by the governing board, the International Feng Shui Guild. And as you can see behind me, it's called the Intrinsic School of Feng Shui. So that's how I got started.
No, that's awesome. So, what is feng shui? Maybe that's too broad of a question, but what is it?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. The simplistic definition is the art of placement. And as I'm very fond of telling people, there's so much more to it than where the bed and where the couch goes and all that kind of stuff. Very important, very important. But there's so much more to it. And if that was all there was to it, I probably wouldn't have been so passionate and intrigued by it. To me, it's really sort of connecting with nature. You want to make things come off as natural as possible. And you do want to connect with the outside. You do want to bring some of that feeling inside. So feng shui is a lot about getting the correct feeling inside and outside and making people feel, believe it or not, not only comfortable, very comfortable, but also secure on a subconscious level. A lot of us have things that we run into, whether it's somebody that's cutting us off on the freeway or whatever, that irritates us. And, we're built this way to actually lash out somewhat. And the idea of flight or fight kind of thing is something that needs to be worked on. And feng shui handles that on a subconscious level, makes us feel a little bit more in control, secure, and all those kind of things. And if those things happen, then all of a sudden we are a lot more comfortable in our setting. And when we're comfortable, we can really start to focus on what's important to us and therefore get better and better on those things. So there's a lot of success behind the whole thing. You certainly want to increase your wealth. You want to be healthier. All those things are part of feng shui. But to me, it all comes back to the idea of feeling very comfortable in your setting and knowing that you can really, really do your best, whatever really turns you on.
It so you said it's the art of placement, but is there a science to it, or is it kind of personalized, right? Like, because something that may make me feel comfortable in my environment could be different for somebody else, or is there a true science behind the way you should set up a room or a house?
The way people define it in books is that it's an art or a science. And it's certainly, there's an art to it, uh, figuring out things individually for people. But yeah, there's a science behind it. And one of the things that sets the intrinsic school of feng shui sort of apart and that I wanted to incorporate was to be able to back up some of these things. I wanted to make sure people understood that these were really true. So, for example, I back up the idea that how important natural light is for an individual. So, we have a lot of people that stay inside quite a bit, especially over the last few years, and it's important for them to reconnect with the outside every day. And sadly, a lot of people don't do that. But again, that science backs that up. But it also backs it up with respect to being involved with nature, with trees, and all that brings into account. If we don't have that, we find, again, human beings have a real problem with it because we really do have a connection to the outside since we started thousands and thousands of
Yeah.
years ago. And so when you cut that off, when you don't have a park to go to, or you don't have a backyard to play in, or whatever, it does affect us to a degree that, again, doesn't make us as secure and as comfortable as possible. And again, once that happens, then pretty much everything falls apart. We just don't succeed where we should. We should be better than that. But yeah, I think it's a science. We try to back up an awful lot of things. I mean, there's a funny term in Feng Shui that some people like to laugh about, and I've been on podcasts where they thought the term poison arrow was funny. And well, it sounds funny, I guess, but there are scientific backups that it really does affect the human being when we have these kind of sharp edges that are pointing at us at particular times, especially for long periods. So again, it is a science to me. It's an environmental science that was developed, started 3 to 4 thousand years ago, and it's just been improved and built on.
I think what I find interesting is that you talk about it being almost on a subconscious level, right? So I think that mindset is one of the most important things. It kind of controls our happiness, our mood, and things like that. So, how does, or do you have stories about how you can change your environment through feng shui? And then without even realizing it, because it does kind of comfort you on a subconscious level, you start to see personal or professional growth.
Sure. And certainly I do run into doubters.
Yeah.
And, quite often when I'm called in for a real estate situation, for example, that they've had difficulty and maybe they've changed agents several times. So they call me in like in the last resort kind of thing. And I'm not trying to pick on males here, but quite often the male is a little bit more doubtful about the situation. And the female, in quite a few cases, is more prone to the idea that it might work. So I've had several of those situations where I come in and yes, I do a few things that, maybe they're not really sure about, but they become believers afterwards because the house then does, within a week or two, get get some offers or get some more traffic or whatever. So, one of the things about feng shui to me that is so nice is that it really makes the MLS photos really pop. And we're now in a situation where people actually, have an awful lot of access to what's out there now. Didn't used to be that way when I started, but now with Realtor.com and Trulia and all of those different websites, you have access to what's out there. And so they're speeding through a lot of these houses and no, no, I don't like the look of it. And sometimes they haven't given it a chance. They really haven't even really taken a real good look at it. So you've got to catch them really quickly to make them look at it. So one of the things that we do an awful lot of is to make sure that the curb appeal photo is really compelling. And so using color and softening poison arrows in the picture and all those kind of things can make it look like a more comforting situation. One of the things that I now advocate to real estate agents is we're going to start off with what we call a yang or a yan photo of the outside. And then we follow it up with a yin photo. And then what I mean by that is yan is more active, aggressive, more daylight kind of situation. So you're going to show it, with brilliant sunshine, and you hopefully catch them at that point. And then they go to the next photo, and it's now a night photo with the lights turned on. So you're catching them emotionally both ways with thinking yang and thinking yin. And so the photos are really important, as you probably can imagine, Jordan, that if the photos don't really catch their interest, they're never going to come back to it. And if they go and they drive by a house just because maybe the realtor gave them a list of things to look at least from the outside, and if the outside doesn't look that compelling to them, they're not going to bother, even though inside might be perfect for them. Maybe the neighborhood is perfect for them. We make quick, snap decisions. So feng shui really does influence the subconscious. And the subconscious really affects 95% of all of our decisions. And that shocks a lot of people. We make decisions at that level because this is our experience, our template of life back there. And yeah, 5% we're looking at the house real quickly at this point, but if we don't have the subconscious feeling positive about the situation, we're not going to get an offer, or we're not going to be really happy with our house.
No, that's super fascinating because it's funny how the subconscious of whoever we're talking to or trying to sell something to has such an impact on that transaction, whether it's how you present yourself in a conversation or, like you said, that quick judgment in a photo. Like one of my favorite books is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And it talks
Uh-huh.
about that, where it's like most of your decisions happen immediately without you thinking about it because it's too slow for your conscious
Yeah,
brain to do.
yeah.
So that's super fascinating. So it would you say that it goes beyond like a typical house staging, right? Like there's all kind of people that stage houses, but that might be to make it look aesthetically pleasing in the sense of stylish or fashionable, but not necessarily subconsciously make someone feel at home when they walk in.
Right, right. I mean, again, I've been at selling houses or helping people sell houses for a long, long time. And there are times that I get people asking me about how to handle a vacant house, for example. You certainly can spend a lot of money to try to doll it up in a lot of cases using a home stager. The thing about feng shui is it's extremely inexpensive to get a better feeling.
Hmm.
And so we take into account things, for example, aroma, very subtly, but that's something that we work on. So we work on particular senses to make sure that it comes across as very comfortable and doable. So, for example, I can remember a situation where I had a house that was vacant in Charlotte, North Carolina. And it was the middle of the winter, and it gets surprisingly, and this, it does get a little cold in the Carolinas.
Yeah.
Most people probably are surprised by that, but it can get pretty cold in the middle of the winter. Definitely not like Boston or New York, but still.
Right.
So anyway, they had turned off all the utilities, and they wanted me to do an open house. So it was actually a lot warmer outside, even though it was only like 35, 40 degrees, but there was some sun out there. I would much rather have been outside than inside. So the idea is to make sure that a person, when they walk into an open house or into a house that they're viewing with their significant other, it's compelling in a lot of ways. So you want to make sure you take care of the temperature. You want to make sure you take care of how it smells. You want to make sure it's super clean. And we really advocate the idea of a deep cleaning, and most people don't do deep cleanings at all. I promise you.
Hmm.
A deep cleaning in feng shui is more like this, where you go from baseboard up to the ceiling, all the corners, every inch, including behind the refrigerator and in the oven, and so it's a totally different animal about how you take care of things. And if you come across that way, just by doing something like that and getting rid of clutter, all of a sudden it's a different situation. It's open up to the possible potential opportunities that they're looking for. They can see themselves, okay, yeah, this might work. It feels comfortable. It's really clean. It smells really good. All those kind of things. So an open house, I mean, a vacant house can be done, and I've done quite a few of them. And if it comes down to it, I only then work on two rooms, especially to make it come across really well. In feng shui, the two most important rooms are the kitchen and the master bedroom. So I pay special attention to them. The kitchen, of course, decluttering, deep cleaning, make sure everything works, blah, blah, blah. But then the master bedroom can become, a little more difficult because you have to sort of show where the bed is going to go. The location of the bed is very pivotal to people on a subconscious level. They want to feel safe and secure that they're going to get a great night's sleep. So Feng Shui spends a lot of time on making sure that the master bedroom comes off in a particular way. We want to show that it's perfect for a couple. And I can promise you there's a lot of folks out there that are not doing that, even if they are in a relationship or not. And so when you're trying to sell a house, if that's the case, you're already throwing up a red flag that is maybe not going to work for me and my significant other. So you try to show a table on both sides. You try to show the same lamp on both sides. You don't want to shove it up against a wall. You want to make sure everybody shows equality. And you see, this is the only room that you're showing pairs of anything. So in a vacant house, I do what I can using boxes or crates and put pretty bedding over top of it. Hopefully nobody's going to try to go to sleep there.
That's interesting.
But I want to show the location because it needs to have a solid wall behind it. And it needs to have a direct view of the door entering. So those are very pivotal to show off on a psychological level. If you're not seeing that, then there's the possibility you might think, I'm not sure I'm going to be ready for the next day. I'm not going to be restored.
That's crazy to me. Well, I mean, it's something that we've all thought of when we walked in a house or even someone else's house, or but you don't think that you're thinking about it, right? So
Right.
that even for someone that is looking to remodel or maybe potentially sell their house or maybe just make their house more um comfortable for them, are those still the two rooms that someone should focus on, like the kitchen and the master bedroom?
I definitely think so. I mean, I know a lot of people get really hung up on the living room, for example. And it's certainly very important in a lot of ways because that's where you bring the family, you might say, together. Okay.
Mhm.
So it definitely has its purpose for a lot of reasons, and it definitely needs to be worked on. But the person that lives in the master bedroom, uses that bedroom, is very important with respect to feng shui because we've got to keep them healthy and happy and successful. You can imagine if they're not, the whole fabric of the family can fall apart at that point. So there is some reasoning behind it to make sure that they are really taken care of perfectly. And it's the same in parts of the Far East. For example, if the family sits around the grandparents in a more auspicious position where they have their backs to a wall and they can see who's coming into the dining room, for example. This is called the classic armchair, and it's something that is very important in all schools of feng shui. And my son, who still lives in Charlotte, is a policeman, and so when I would get together with him for lunch, even though he doesn't know how to say feng shui, and he certainly doesn't believe in feng shui, you know, he would always sit in the same place. He would always sit with his back to a wall,
Hmm.
and he could see who was entering the restaurant. So he had more of a scope of the whole area. And we're just wired that way. So the classic armchair, again, I think of it as a science. It makes sense to me that you want to be as protected as you possibly can wherever you sit. So yeah, it's definitely conducive to whether you're selling or not. You want to feel as comfortable as possible in your setting. And once that happens, then a lot of really good things can happen in your life. Whatever your passions are, whatever your job is, things can get a little bit better, a little easier, and the promotions are going to come and those kind of things. Once you start to feel not quite right in an environment, then things sort of go the other direction.
When did you start incorporating it in your own life? Was it always there? You just didn't know what to call it? Or was it once you started doing it professionally and kind of staging it in houses?
I've never had anybody ask me that question. That's a good one. I've always really been into the idea of how the human mind works, always, and all the way back into the late 70s. So it's always been something that intrigues me, and I've always wondered what makes a person safe, secure, successful. So, I guess in some ways I've always been searching and searching for something like that. So maybe that's one of the reasons why Feng Shui right away sort of hit me and said, hey, wow, I never heard of this before. And I like what it's telling me. So I found out in real estate, color is a huge bonus or a huge problem when you're selling a house. And Feng Shui has a lot to do with color. So, I had been into it for a long time. I am a certified home stager myself of over 20 years. So I knew there was an awful lot to this whole thing. But I think with respect to Feng Shui, I found an easier, less expensive way of doing it.
Um, it, I wonder, and kind of what prompted me for that question is, and look and doing some research in your past and in your life, you see the coaching and the helping of young. So is it, you think it's that search for, you talked about how the mind works. So kind of that, whether it be subconscious or conscious, that mental clarity in yourself and in others that kind of led you to identifying that as a career.
Yeah, that, that's that's a great connection. I when I was a varsity basketball coach in New Jersey, I was doing something that probably no other coach in the state was doing. I was into visualization at that point. So, some people have trouble shooting free throws. And you can sometimes practice and practice and practice, and it still doesn't um, quite get where you want it to get. So I would have them visualize with their eyes closed, going through the process of doing this. I'm sure they went home and talked to their parents, and they probably thought that, coaches really lost it. But I believe there's a lot to it, how you use your mind to get from one direction, from one place to another. So, I never thought about that part of that connection, but that again is sort of exciting that you brought that up. But I've always been into the idea that you can do things in a lot of different ways. Even the way we practiced, I think I was a very good practice coach, and so we would go through stage after stage working on a particular skill. Somebody across the court would be doing something different. So I wanted to try to be as inventive as I could, but at the same time not put them through 2 hours of grueling practice, especially as the season got longer and longer. Let's face it, the season can be very, very long, and at times sort of bring you down health wise and stuff like that. So I was always trying to limit certain things and trying to make the practice fun. I think I'm a very detailed person. And so because of that, I think I had success in that field and in other fields too.
Now it's, how did you, and I was an athlete. I played basketball as well, and I had a coach in college that I didn't appreciate until later, but he was very successful, and there was a lot of details in practice. So everything in college, it becomes a lot more. So it's a 3 hour block every day,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
everything he had it on the scoreboard. Like it would be a timer. So every drill, every stage was already planned out, and it was set on a timer, even the water breaks. So then that would go up for a minute or whatever, and everybody go get their drink. So
Wow.
how did you set up your practice? You were working with a younger group of kids and maybe not taking it as serious as a college coach, but how did you set that up? And what were those details that you used to train them?
Well, I'm not sure I didn't take it as seriously, and probably that,
It's probably why you were
one of the
good.
reasons, why I finally ended up getting out. When I then moved to the Carolinas and I was teaching for a while, I was hired by a prep school to teach mathematics and computer science, and at the same time, they insisted that I had to also be the assistant coach for this program. And that worried me until I found out that he had been a Duke assistant
Uh-huh.
and that he had been the head coach at George Washington.
Wow.
And so, or I think it was American. I'm sorry, American
Oh.
University. But definitely he did things a little differently than I did. Uh, I tried to definitely have every 5 minutes pretty much scheduled how I was going to do things. And he was sort of the same way. So it was pretty easy to do that. I tried to make sure that, again, every minute meant something, that, whether we had to work on getting the ball from under the basket on their end or our end or whatever. And there were certain things that I really wanted to work on depending on who we were going to play. For example, I had a lot of success with full court pressing, and I enjoyed that kind of thing. At that point in the 70s, I know you're too young to remember John Wooden maybe too much, but John Wooden was one of my heroes, and he was sort of the one that used a full court press. So we would work on a full court zone press and how it would be effective in particular ways with particular teams.
Hmm.
So depending on who we're playing, you change it up a little bit. So I try to, again, be very, very specific and very detail oriented. Try not to waste their time, and like I said, it can be a long season, and in the middle of the winter, it can be a little depressing outside too. So this was in
Yeah.
New Jersey. So anyway,
No, I that's interesting. So it prompts something in my mind. Whenever I was growing up, my dad was always now I kind of look back and see that he did things in a way that wasn't like overt in telling you how to do things, was just like, here, you need to figure it out for yourself. So one of the things that he got was a VHS, and it was the John, he had like some, John Wooden had some sort of like basketball fundamentals
yeah.
video. I
Mhm.
used to watch it on a loop, but I remember him talking about the press. So the one thing I tried to get really good at when I was young was ball handling so that a press couldn't affect us,
Oh,
or at least me. But that's funny that you, so yeah, John
yes.
Wooden was before my time, but I did see his fundamentals to basketball video.
It's funny, if I ever went back in time as a player,
Yeah.
nothing would have been more important than being able to handle the ball on your weak side.
Yep.
And you know, my teams played man to man, and we'd always pretty much run up against people who only could basically go right because there's not a lot of left-handers out. So to me, that's a very important thing. But yeah, if I went back when I was 15,
Yeah.
14, whatever, I tell you, I'd be working on my left hand until I bled. It
There
was
you go.
really that important. But you're talking about Wooden. He had this the pyramids of success. Maybe you saw that. And so, he had a lot of little things that he would say. I like this one especially, where he would say, you know, be quick, but don't be fast, kind of thing. You want to, some people speed up too much, and therefore they're not going to see the open man. They're just going 100 miles an hour.
Hmm.
You want to be quick, but you don't want to be blazing fast. That's just not going to work very well on the court or really anywhere. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's some, I don't know who said it, but there's one that's like slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Like you slow things down because you can be more precise, and
Yeah.
that in and of
Yeah.
itself makes you faster. How did so
Yeah.
I want I'm sorry I'm diving into basketball. It's just a you talked about that free throw thing. So when you said you would have them go home and practice, like it wasn't actually shooting free throws, it was like a mindset thing, or was it actually shooting them blindfolded?
Oh, no, they weren't shooting.
Right.
I would have them stand at the free throw line. Of course, all courts have like 8 to 12 baskets around it. And so we'd there and just visualize going through the motion of being successful, holding,
Huh.
and that they would hold the ball, but I didn't want them shooting it so much. I just want them to get the feel, the idea, the correct arc, and to get it over that darn front rim and to put it in. So I mean, I knew early on that certain things I could control more than others as a coach. I couldn't control shoot. I didn't coach in the 3-point system, so even though that probably would have helped me because I was a good shooter. But to me, the only thing I could control was their defense,
Mm.
to a degree, their rebounding and their free throw shooting. So I wanted to make sure they were really on top of those three things. If that's the case and they had an off shooting night, we still had a good shot, at putting a W up. So, those were the things that I stressed an awful lot. And we had some high scoring teams, but you know, I I also knew that that could go. I knew my offense would go from night to night sometimes. So yeah, I tried to stress what was as controllable as possible.
Did you grow up in New Jersey? I know you said that's where you were teaching early on. Is that where you're from?
No, no, I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania, central Pennsylvania, between Williamsport and State College, where Penn State is.
Yeah. Okay.
Real cold, lots of shoveling of
Hey.
snow, and I played all three sports off and on. I'm a huge baseball fan too, so I tried a lot of different things. But yeah, that's where I grew up. It's a beautiful area. There's not an awful lot of employment in those areas, but it's a beautiful area. And I told everybody I took the big bucks and moved to New Jersey when they offered me a position in a little town in central New Jersey. Uh, the difference was like $1,200, but that was a
What?
lot of money back then.
So that was in teaching that you got that offer.
Yeah, yeah, I was offered I still remember $7,500 to start in New Jersey and 6,300 in
Nice.
a little town called Tyrone, Pennsylvania. And you know, believe it or not, I really wanted to get out of central Pennsylvania at this point and start a new life. I needed to see more of the world. So it was an easy decision. It wasn't just because they paid me off.
Right. No, I think that perspective is important. Like I grew up in a very rural town in West Virginia, and you can lose sight of how big the world really is
Yeah,
when you're only in
yeah.
contact with a few people. Um, is teaching and coaching what you wanted to do?
Hmm. Frankly, that goes back to actually a philosophy I have about education. I think education is really not done very well in some cases. We don't teach a lot of the things that we should be teaching, like good citizenship and all that kind of stuff. But guidance counselors, at least when I grew up, really didn't do much guiding.
Yeah.
So I had no idea what was out there, none. And the school that I went to, Jordan, was a small school that had started as a teacher's college and in Lock Haven. And it was close enough that I could commute. So my family really couldn't afford at that point me to go to Penn State or some of the other schools. I just couldn't afford it. So I went there. They only had education courses and a liberal arts program at that point. They now, believe it or not, even they have a graduate program. It's now Lock Haven University. But
Mm.
at that point, I didn't have an awful lot of choices. And a lot of kids nowadays still don't know that there are so many possibilities out there. I think we need to open up their eyes that, you don't need to go to college. You don't need to do this. There's so many possibilities if you're good with your hands or you like to problem solve, whatever. But that goes back to my philosophy. I just think that a lot of things need to be changed. And guidance counselors, instead of being paper pushers
Yeah.
and test givers, need to be guiding us. I mean, to me, that's what's important. And I still remember, even though I was in the college prep situation, my guidance counselor said, "Well, your science scores are not good enough." Because I had said, "Well, I guess I'll be an engineer." I said, "Oh, your science scores are not good enough." So whatever. And so I went into it. I majored in mathematics. It started me off well. I was at least in demand to teach mathematics. And so that's what I did. And coaching, it wasn't even something I'd consider. But then after my first year in this middle school, an opening happened at that point for seventh and eighth grade. And I applied for it and they gave it to me. And I had great success to start with. So I was totally into it at this point. And then they promoted me to the freshman level, and one thing led to another, and I became varsity. No, no, not at all. No, I had no idea that I'd ever go that route. So it turned out well.
Yeah. No, so I always find it interesting how uh, our paths can change just based on
Mhm.
circumstances or finding interests. I always struggled with what I wanted to be when I got older, and I always thought that people had it figured out. Like you had an interest, and that's just you went into it. I was kind of envious of that, but you don't know things until you try them, right? And that's one of the
Right,
things I like to
right.
talk about, and one of the things I'm passionate about is getting young people interested in my businesses are in the trades. We've talked a little bit about before, and kind of removing that stigma from blue collar careers, and trying
Mm.
to educate young people that you can do fun things. I mean, it can be hard work. It's all work should be rewarding, and but there's opportunities there outside of just the standard thoughts of what that work looks like.
I when I was in undergraduate school, I do remember learning about certain things like apprenticeships in Germany, for example. And to me, that we still need those kind of things. We need to have people apprentice under people and become, hopefully almost as good as they are. We seem to put those things to the side now. They're to me very important. And I remember doing my dissertation for my master's degree, and I again that was something that we're just lagging behind. It seems like to me. So I definitely have some feelings about the whole thing. As I was saying, I think kids need to learn how to be good citizens, good neighbors, and all those kind of things. And even though I love teaching algebra and geometry and trig, most of that stuff is probably unnecessary for most people. I really do think algebra probably is something that everybody should get involved with. But after that, even though I enjoyed that stuff, we could certainly replace that with something that is more helpful. I think nowadays there's an awful lot of folks that are divided, and they feel like maybe they're not getting their fair share. And I think in some ways it's because of our educational system not really serving them very
I wonder if there's ways to teach. Um, Maybe it's interpersonal skills, but to me, that divide is that we don't have enough dialogue because I think we all agree on a lot more things than we disagree on. But a lot of times the media tells us otherwise. But maybe there's ways to train kids on, hey, let there's appropriate ways to have open dialogue about beliefs or whatever it is, and
right.
constructively talk about it with others.
Right. No, I totally agree. With social media nowadays, and even though, I really spend time on LinkedIn, but,
Mhm.
there's a lot that goes on social media that I really, really find offensive and I'm against. And they're giving people the wrong ideas. They're lying to people in some cases. And I remember actually just last week, one of the ministers in Russia said, "Sure, yeah, we definitely did get involved with the election," and that was the first time that they actually admitted it. And I know that they did. Well, I don't know that I did, but as far as I'm concerned, why wouldn't I think they did? And so I would like to keep this kind of stuff out. I mean, I want to be able to make a decision on my vote or how I feel, by myself. And it seems like, again, social media is really something that's sort of hurting us in some ways. So, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or whatever, you need to take that with a grain of salt. And a lot of people don't. They think it's the truth, always the truth. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's in my mind, we're still young in the even the internet as a whole, right? That's only been around for
Right.
30 years. We were not we didn't evolve in a way that allowed us to process this much information, to know this much about people that fast. The example, I don't know where I heard this, but um like the printing press was invented, 400 years before we got to the first newspapers. For 400
Hmm.
years, they played with it in printed Bibles in schools and in churches. Or so how it took them 400 years to realize that we could make an entire population literate. What will 400 years of the internet or social connections look like? Like the 20 years we've had is such a small sample size of what it should become and what it can become. But I think we're all just kind of learning the scope of what it is at this point.
I was thinking when you were talking about that back in classical Greece, it was potential. You had the potential to actually know everything, basically, at that
Mm,
point. Now, there's no way.
all
You
right.
can't. You can even take one area and you wouldn't know everything about that area. You're right about all the information that just comes pounding at us. It's overwhelming at times, and I know some people will just shut it off totally. There are times that I felt like doing that. The news can sometimes really sort of be very upsetting, and I definitely have eliminated some of it at this
Mm-hmm.
point. But I also feel like I need to know what's going on in the world, and so I find that really remarkable that at one time in our lives it was very very possible to know pretty much everything, and to me it can be very scary, all the information that's out there, and we're giving all this information to a lot of people who sometimes don't really totally use it correctly, and it's very easy to maneuver it a little bit and say something that's really not the truth, and that's where I have a problem with some of the social.
So, and I'm going to try and tie this back to uh, decision making because I think that's the the crux of what we've been talking about. When we're processing all this, how does someone go about finding their passion or what it is? Because I think it's really interesting that you were successful in real estate and you certainly could have kept doing that, right? I mean, but you decided to follow this passion that you had, sell your business and go this route. So, how did you come to that decision? And how do you think other people can identify that and go forward with it?
Well, I think one of the things that stops us is that we get frightened about making a change, and we want all we worry about is the security part of it and not giving ourselves enough credit that we can do this. But I can back up to when I was teaching, solely teaching and coaching. I didn't think that I was able to do anything else,
Mm,
primarily because I didn't have my eyes opened and I just didn't have any idea what I was capable of doing. Sure, I had a couple of degrees, but what is that going to do for me? And then moved to the Carolinas and was one thinking very seriously about getting out of it. Thank God for my wife. She was an assistant superintendent in a fairly large school district in the Carolinas. So she had been in education. Actually, almost everybody in my family was in education, and so she knew that I was at a crossroads, and she supported me. Sometimes the significant other can really stop you in your tracks. Yes, security is important, but you got to believe in yourself. And so she said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I want to do something that's not inside four walls."
mm,
And so I want to get outside somehow. And she said, "Well, how about real estate?" And I had never thought much about it. And one thing led to another, and I just ran into the right mentor, you might say, my former partner, and he gave me the ideas that you could do this, do that, and potentially be able to pick up some steam in the first year or so. In real estate, the first year can be miserable for almost anybody unless you have an awful lot of a large network, and most of real estate agents don't really. So that first year, Jordan, I did anything I could to not go back into the classroom.
mm.
I was tutoring. I was doing a few other little things, but I was putting up probably more time into my real estate business than anybody else in the office. I was thinking a lot of creative ways. I mean, we could get into that if you want to, but there are a lot of creative things that I did to try to make sure that I continued to be semi-successful that first year. In real estate, the turnover is amazing every year. A quarter of the people leave every year, replaced by
Huh.
another quarter, thinking that it's fairly easy, fairly simple. You know, Look at those big commission checks. Well, it's not quite like that. It's takes a lot of work, a lot of time, and then when you finally get successful, you're now juggling 4 or 5 or 6 different people at the same time, and it can be very stressful. But you have to believe in yourself, and you have to have your loved ones support you too. And sometimes all they want to worry about is, look, you got a paycheck that comes in every couple of weeks. You really want to let that go, you know? Thank God, thank God I met her, married her, and I met her on a blind date set up by my sister, and it's just we knew probably 2 months in that we were going to get married. That it was that kind of situation. But if I hadn't met somebody like that, and I had met somebody before and it didn't work out after 8 years, you got to meet people that really believe in each other and not be frightened, I think is really important. You got to believe in yourself.
No, that's powerful. I think that even, for myself, it's been that fear of putting yourself out there because you're afraid of
Yeah.
judgment from others. But a common theme from talking to people is that idea that whether it be a specific mentorship or just the fact that sometimes other people in your life can tell you what you're good at.
Mm.
And that's kind of powerful that I don't, you may not know what it is, but by doing things that you like, and then other people will identify a lot of times what you can be successful at. And it sounds like
Right.
that kind of happened with you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I found out when I started pursuing the idea that who knew, but school teachers actually make good real estate agents because they're
Huh.
used to prepping, being prepared for situations, and being creative. I mean, I was a high school teacher the last 3 years, 4 years, but even then, I was using my bulletin boards. Most high school teachers are not using their bulletin boards. If you get my drift, it's just they're not being very creative. They're not trying to show possibilities. So I guess it was to my benefit to start in middle school, and but they were, teachers just sort of are used to prepping and preparing for situations and talking to people and getting people to do what they want them to do, kind of thing. So, when you have a classroom of 30 people, it can be very overwhelming at times. And there are a lot of different personalities in there. And then you turn it over 5 times in a day, you know. So it's not an easy job, but it's a great field to prepare for almost anything, to tell you the truth.
Now you talked about the creativity and teaching and lesson plans, and also that creativity to make yourself successful those first years being a real estate agent. So let's dive into that. What were some of those things that you used creatively, I don't know what word I was trying to say, to kind of help make sure you were successful?
Okay. Here's one that's really sort of out there, I guess you might say. And my wife still likes to joke about this situation, but I didn't have an awful lot of money for advertising at this point. I mean, I couldn't compete with the real estate agent that had their face on a billboard. I couldn't do that. So right away, I was picking up listings because I knew that was the route to go. And so I was in what's called the real estate book. You've heard of Homes and Land and all
Mm-hmm.
those things. They have the color pictures of the things. So even at that point, the other agents in my office, and I wasn't the owner at this point, thought, who the heck does he think he is? So, I I had a page in the real estate book pretty quickly. But what I'm getting at is that I also knew that a lot of people pick these up. Charlotte has a big downtown. So, and a lot of other areas that are very wealthy. So I knew where these books were being picked up. So I would go to these places. I would walk into the grocery store, for example, pick up about 30 of them, take them out to my car, and staple my card in each one of them on page. Then I take the 30 back in, and put it back in. I did this place after place after place. And on Sundays, I would go downtown Charlotte and do this, all these little racks all over the place, you know. And it's funny, a lot of the other agents were, saying, oh, this is a tough market, this is that, and this, that. And they couldn't see any potential possibilities. I could see was a lot of potential possibilities. I mean, for example, in the newspaper, a lot of people's lives that were changing drastically. So you needed to look at the newspaper and look at what was happening, whether it was births, people getting married. Why couldn't I send them a note? Okay. I mean, I don't know them. They don't know me. But why not? What am I going to do? Sit around and just drink coffee, which is what some of them did,
Mm.
or went home very early, and turned on, I don't know, Judge Judy? I don't know. So I spent a lot of time on the road doing these things. I also went to, we built in the Charlotte area, there's a lot of new homes that were built, a lot of different communities. So some days that was what I did. I would drive to the new community, introduce myself to that person, pick up their floor plans to make myself, hey, look, I got all the floor plans throughout the whole city. You know, I can tell you what is possible. This is what you need. Okay, look, here's a place that has it. They're also fairly close to your job. Nobody else would do some of these things. I just outworked people in a lot of ways. But I also found it so enjoyable, Jordan, because I'm in my car instead of in a classroom. I've got my music on, and I'm just driving, and it's sunny out. Hey, this was heaven to me because I was being creative, productive, and thinking further ahead than a lot of other people. And to me, that was so much fun. So I really the hunt, as I would call it, was very, very fun to me. And if you know what a FISBO is, for sale by owner,
Mhm.
that also is another way that I made a fair amount of money from, is that I would drive around other days picking up FISBOs, writing down their address. Because not all of them were in the paper. But in Charlotte, the Charlotte Observer, the paper would have it in on Saturdays. I scoured those every Saturday and wrote letters to them. Okay, so I had routines. There were routines. Whether it was to hit the for sale by for sale by owners, or hit the boxes where the magazines were, or whatever. I was never in the office. When you're a real estate agent and you're in the office, you're not doing much really in a lot of cases. You're not really prospecting. You're not working at the job. And again, I found that out, and so I did a lot of strange things, you might say, but they were. Another part of it, before I stop on this particular subject, was there are expired listings that happen every day all over the city. And Charlotte is a big area, so there were certain ones that were much more attractive to me than others. So I would drive out to their house with a notebook with their name in it, with what I was all about, with maybe 10, 12 pages in it, and prop it in front of their door. I wouldn't bother them, but I would put the notebook right there. And so, at least they knew who I was after a while. They kind of,
That's very impressive. That's I don't know. That's really cool to see how you found niches to target and to maximize, but mainly it's just like, let me just be productive. Let me get out there and actually do something rather than sit and wait for someone to call me and want me to sell their house.
That's right. I'd rather listen to music than listen to somebody talking bad
Yeah.
in the office.
So then, you make the switch from this successful business to the feng shui consultancy, but then what drives you? So it's funny to me, I don't know why, but you wanted out of the classroom. So now you've started a school, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you went from there, it's kind of full circle, right? You wanted out, but now you're back
Mhm.
to it.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about all the different steps, Jordan, I mean, I was a teacher for basically 15 years, public and private schools. And then I went into real estate and was in that for about 19 or so. And in there was an overlap with feng shui, which is related to real estate to some degree. So, a lot of people think of it that way. So, and I was used to speaking in front of people,
Mm.
used to, so it just seemed like, okay, well, gee, I like being creative. I like looking at houses. I love feng shui, so it just putting the whole thing together made total sense to me. So that first year, even though I was still in real estate at this point, Tuesdays, I was going to a business meeting in some office, real estate office, to speak for whatever time they'd give me, 15, 20 minutes. And, that just, it grew out of that. And then I created my own certification program called the Feng Shui Staging Professional, which is still going strong. And I was taking that on the road. So it was, again, one thing led to another. And I'm in this for good. As I tell people, this is my fourth career change, and I'm not going anywhere after this one.
So is it, what's next, right? So you've done all these things. You have this school. You've written at least three books about it. So is it still just kind of training the real estate agents and staging professionals in this art, or is it how do you get that message out there to home buyers even that this is an important thing, or does that matter?
Well, 4 years ago when I started the school, the Intrinsic School of Feng Shui, I wanted to branch out and work with everybody. So it was no longer just real estate agents, even though I still do that. I actually even have two courses where I give 3 hours of continuing education to realtors in Florida. So I'm driving around Florida doing this, giving 3 hours on feng shui, for example. And a lot of people love the class, love the course, and all that kind of stuff. But I still have that avenue, and I still work with real estate agents here and there. And I'm now going into mentoring, where I'm going to mentor real estate agents for X number of weeks, as long as they want to to use the same system that I was using in real estate in Charlotte and in South Carolina. So yeah, I'm now branching into mentoring. Who knows what's after that? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's just you got to keep as young as possible. I'm in my 70s now, and I just want to continue to do something where I feel blessed and content. And many people quit too quickly without thinking about what's possible out there. There are so many things you can do, even to into your retirement years.
Mhm.
Keep your mind going, your body going. I pride myself in both those areas that I'm trying not to deteriorate too quickly.
Is is this a um is it a passion project for, like, is giving back part of the reward for you, that you're kind of sharing this success that you found and that can help you both, not even on a professional level, but almost spiritually? Is it that giving back what you find most rewarding?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I even tell my partner Lisa that yeah, we want to keep score and we want to make some money. but I'm not at the stage where that is the thing that's really pushing me.
Hmm.
I, I enjoy people, their light bulb comes out up or out above their head when they say, "Oh yeah, wow, I never thought about that." I do. I like that. I like people discovering feng shui. I like the idea of being able to help some people. You know, it's not just about the money at all. And those years were before this. I definitely, I want to keep going, but it really turns me on that people become enlightened about the whole situation and find it enjoyable. I do really push the idea that there's joy to this lifestyle, and why not try to be an entrepreneur? Why not
Hmm.
try to see what you can do by yourself? I mean, I rush hour is something that I stay away from. I mean, when I make an appointment with somebody, I'm sorry, I am not going to meet you at 9 o'clock or 8:30, and I am not going to be on the road at 4:30, 5 o'clock. I'm just not going to do that. So if you want what I have to offer, that's fine, but it's not going to be during rush hour. I hate rush hour at this point,
Yeah.
and I don't want to do anything that stresses me. So, certainly I get stressed at times because I put a lot of pressure on myself to develop things and get better. But I'm going to do what I can to control my stress and frustration.
Can we, myself included, because you've enlightened me, just so that you know, and that was one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because it's something that you've heard the word before, but don't really dive in or understand the meaning. But is it something where I have to go out and buy things to change my decorations in my home, or can I make it more feng shui just by adjusting things in my house?
Yeah, actually, the neat thing about feng shui is that you really take a lot more out than you put in.
Ah.
And in a lot of cases, what you already have, you can use. So it's a very inexpensive way of changing the feeling. I developed the system many, many years ago about taking care of what I refer to as the four big D's. I had to make up some words to make sure they were D's. But but as I tell people, this is like a way of doing a space clearing, basically. But not everybody is into the idea of doing a space clearing, a formal one. So yeah, I mean, you can do the four big D's, which is just basically smell bokers. Okay, you're going to declutter. Of course, that's a big thing in feng shui. So basically, you're getting rid of some stuff, or at least packing it away in some shed or something. So you're decluttering, you're detailing, which makes sure you make sure everything works. When I would go into houses at times, something didn't work. It would cause frustration to a degree for me and for my client. I turn this light on, nothing happens, or so detailing is another thing. You want to make sure that things work properly. And then another one is depersonalizing, which might sound a little out there, but the idea of not making it so much just you, but making less of the predecessor energy showing through and everywhere. And we've
Mhm.
all been in houses where you certainly know who lives there, and you can't see yourself there, and it's very hard to may even get comfortable sometimes when you're visiting. And then the deep cleaning, as we've already talked about, is very, very pivotal, and most people don't do it. I mean, I'm very fond of saying that certain businesses that are well known for coming out and cleaning a place, franchises, they don't do that. But a deep cleaning done once or twice a year really changes the feeling of a place tremendously. So doing those four, you know, is elbow grease. And so, okay, maybe you think that's beneath you in some cases for
Mhm.
some people. Well, if it is, then go ahead and go the expensive route. So we take care of the four big D's. The way I do an evaluation and I come through what needs to be changed with respect to what I call the four tools. And you probably have heard the five elements and all those kind of things that I'm trying to get the right balance and harmony with respect to color and everything. So yeah, in a lot of cases, you really don't need to buy stuff. Some people do it anyway because they think, okay, I'm going to feng shui my house. Let me go on Google and buy, a couple $100 worth of worthless stuff.
Hmm.
So there is a worthless stuff out there to me that does not help you. I'm all about making it easy to live in, be very comfortable, you know, enjoy coming home to it. But if you have an awful lot of junk all over the place, that's just not going to do it. So yeah, you can do it very inexpensively, and you don't have to spend hardly anything. Yeah, you might have to get a little dirty.
Wow. And then you talked a little bit before about the poison arrows, right? So is that the idea that like the right angles and all the man-made things is what those are? Or tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. You can think of a lot of pointy things, basically. For example, you go into the city, you're going to see some buildings that are got a lot of sharp edges on them. And in a city like Hong Kong, there's actually a bustling business for lawyers there. They sue people over poison arrows.
Mm.
When a building goes up in Hong Kong, for example, you can bet right behind it there's going to be somebody that's going to be upset because the corner of your new building that is maybe 30 stories high is pointed at their apartment. So it's a very big deal in parts of the world. And so when I work with an environment, I am looking for those kind of things. Here's a prime example that I always run into in the bedroom, the important master bedroom, where they might have a dresser. The edge of a dresser is pointed right where they lay their head overnight. So they're spending 8 hours possibly without moving with this poison arrow pointing at them. Now, again, this is a little bit out there for some people. I understand that, but there are studies and research that point out that this does actually have an adverse effect on people. So where your favorite sitting area is, you might have a corner that protrudes and points right at you, or a column that is behind your back, or whatever, or a piece of furniture. So you move them, or you move where you're sitting a little bit. Sometimes it's just an adjustment. And so, with respect to the bed, for example, I'm going to move the bed a little bit, maybe only 6 inches, maybe a couple of feet. But again, I keep in mind the classic armchair. I want to make sure I have a solid foundation stability behind me, and then I can see the entrance. Those are pivotal. But at the same time, I can adjust moving things a little bit, whether it's the dresser or the bed, to make sure that we don't have a poison arrow pointing at them all night long. It's not such a big thing, Jordan, if you're going to be there for 15, 20 minutes. But it's still, it gets worse and worse. And we're talking about duration. So you just don't want that. Now, with respect to selling a house, we get right down to the point of how you present the front door. The front door, you don't want a lot of pointy things pointing at the person walking up to the door,
Mm.
because right away it's causing a little bit of stress. And we want to make sure they come in feeling good and comfortable and not thinking there's anything to worry about. So we take away pointy objects, or we soften them is the word I use. So for example, the framing of the door, I want to use rounded pots instead of pots that have edges on them. Okay, no big deal. Okay, and I want to have some particular color in there and all that kind of stuff. But I do what I can by using landscaping or pots around the front door to soften the entrance so it's a more welcoming person.
Is the idea behind that the subconscious fear of something sharp or like a danger?
I think so. I do think
Okay.
so. And again, the subconscious is so powerful
Hmm.
that you can actually put yourself to die if you really want to go that route. Our minds are so powerful that
Hmm.
we sometimes don't have much control over what's going on. So yeah, the subconscious is involved with all of these decisions. How is this going to affect me? How's it going to make this worse than it should be? So we take away a lot of pointy things. We don't want to have any kind of briars or needles, in a plant close to the door, anything that might catch somebody. We want to take away all that kind of stuff. So we smooth the outside or soften the outside by using like hanging plants or bushes or trees. So we make it softer. I mean, I've got a picture that I've been using now for probably 15 years now of of a ranch home that was built like in the 50s, 60s, which were very prevalent back then at that point. Not at all comfortable or attractive. Okay, but they are all over this country, I promise you, because I've been in a lot of places. So I take it and then I'm able with PowerPoint to bring in things to say, okay, here's a good place for a plant. Here's a good place for a bush. I'm going to put a tree over here in this corner. So I bring them in and then I'm showing them the after at that point that shows them how I might go about softening a very poorly looking 1956 ranch, you know, in Colorado or in New Hampshire or wherever it is, that makes it a little more comfortable and actually more attractive for a person.
That's I don't know, that's very interesting. Um, so and it doesn't have to be necessarily related to feng shui, but what's one piece of advice you'd want people to take from our conversation today?
Well, believe it or not, I'd probably say, be open-minded. There are a lot of things out there that you don't possibly know about that actually do work. A lot of people at one time or another thought that something like acupuncture was crazy, and it's now become more and more accepted. It's working with chi just like I'm working with chi also. There is a lot to it. Anything that's been developed so long ago and has stuck around for so long, there's got to be something really to it. There's a lot of common sense to feng shui. So there are a lot of different schools, a lot of different thoughts. Our school is maybe more practical minded than maybe some, but I think that's important because what happens is that you need to be able to speak to people on a particular wavelength to explain things to them. So we talk a lot about how you talk to people about it, because let's face it, there are people that think it's, again, a little bit far out there, but it does work. And, it's something to me that really everybody should at least consider looking into, whether they read a book or whatever. It really makes an environment a lot more attractive, more comfortable, and more secure.
Well, we talked a little bit about the lack of dialogue, but I think people can be quick to dismiss something they don't understand, right? So
Yeah.
I think being open minded is really important because I mean all this stuff is really based on I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like energy, right? And I just like that idea of there's forces in nature and within ourselves that truly have an impact on us. So, like you said, be open minded, learn how to tap into those things, right? And
Hmm.
make yourself a better person.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, it's been proven, you know, I don't know how many hundreds of years ago, but everything is energy. We're nothing but energy
Yeah.
too. I tell people, look at your coffee table. It's created by the same kind of thing. It's just vibrating at a very different pace right now.
Mm.
Everything is energy. It's fine. It's finite. There's a certain amount of energy. Sometimes it's destroyed and comes back in a different look or a different way. But everything is energy on this planet, and I think more and more people are understanding that is what it is. And so, really, what any feng shui practitioner does is they're really manipulating energy to come off as a positive in a setting. And so there's a lot of ways to do it, but I guess basically that's really what a practitioner does.
That's awesome. What's the best way that somebody can find you or learn more about, what you're doing?
Well, the best site, I have a couple, but you can type in my name and you'll find out there's a lot of things that come up. Most of them are good. Actually, I think they all are.
Okay, that's good.
But the website is www.intrinsicSchoolOfFengShui.com. And you can definitely contact myself or my partner, Lisa Alban, there if you'd like to. If you'd like more information about what we do, would love to send you stuff with no pressure. I promise you that. Neither one of us are that kind of individual. Or, if we were, I guess we'd be in a different business.
There you go. No, I appreciate it. And I really appreciate your time today coming on here,
You're very
taking a
welcome.
chance and doing this with me, since, you didn't know me and I just kind of cold called or cold emailed you and asked. But I find your stuff interesting and I'm really glad we had a chance to talk.
Same here, Jordan. It's nice talking to you too. I enjoyed it very much.